You're on, Amy Phelps.
I'm on. So I'm Amy Phelps, as Sheila said, and I'm a professor in the Department of Chemistry. And I was part of the course redesign group that met here last semester fairly regularly. And so Sheila asked me to come today and talk a little bit, tell a little bit about POGIL. So POGIL is process-oriented guided inquiry learning. So I'm going to give you just the Cliff Notes version of how I got here, not here today, but here with POGIL. POGIL was, I was not happy, personally, with the way that my students and I were spending our time together. It didn't feel like, with all the ways for information to be gathered in the world now, that me giving information was a great use of our time. Not because I don't love to be in front of a crowd, and not because I don't find myself absolutely fascinating for 55 minutes at a time. But my students didn't always agree. And it just felt like I was sending them out to do the part that they needed my help on their own. Work problems, to think about the material, about, hey, here's your homework, go out there into the world. And so that was my unhappiness. And so I got thinking about, what are some of the things that I could do that might be different? There we go. So POGIL was started in chemistry departments in 1994, and that was convenient for me because I was being unhappy at about the same time. And it was part of an NSF push to look at new ways to deal particularly with science courses, and so POGIL was just one of the many things that came out of that. It's now being used in a variety of disciplines. It's being used in both high school and college. And it's based on learning cycles, which is probably the most impactful thing that ever happened to me, was learning about learning cycles. A learning cycle is a process by which we try to help students come to new understanding. And the three-step learning cycle, which is the only one I can keep in my head, I know we do 5 E's with the M-Teach people, Nancy, but I can't keep all those E's in my head. Starts with an exploration of a topic, then you move to concept development. Hey, for science people, that means we don't start with all the definitions. We move to concept development where we might use some of those good definitions. And then if somebody knows something, that would be apply it to a new situation, so it ends with application. Well, I was already trying to do this with my lesson design. I was already trying to do this with my lab design, and so it was kind of a natural fit for me. And so that was cool. But this was probably the biggest hook for me, that POGIL philosophy, POGIL process is philosophically aligned with the notions that telling and teaching are not the same thing, necessarily, and that furthermore, students who are part of a community tend to be more successful. And for those of us here at MTSU who are interested in retention, they also tend to hang around longer if they're part of a community. And that really that knowledge is a personal construction, and that makes people sometimes uncomfortable, but they're more comfortable if they think about it as social construction. What we know, even in a field like chemistry, which is, we like to think of ourselves one of those hard objective sciences, what we know is a social construction of chemists based on data and our understanding of them. And every time we get a new instrument, gives us new data, sometimes our construction of that reality changes. And so this is a philosophical approach that POGIL is based on. Now, it's really difficult for me to talk to you about POGIL because the whole purpose of POGIL is that I'm not talking all the time. And so this is sort of an interesting conundrum that I found myself in. So, and knowing that you weren't all going to be science people, or assuming that you weren't all going to be science people, and that I have a plethora of chemistry POGILs that you probably aren't terribly interested in, I've picked something that I think is it says the prerequisite skill is ability to round numbers, so I think you're probably good. And this is a POGIL that we use in Chemistry 1110. It is not mine. I thought that was kind of, I brought some of mine. This is not mine. It's written by one of my colleagues. But I wanted to, the reason I picked this one is because it's, in addition to being, anybody can do it, that it's pretty short. POGILs can be 15, 20 minutes, and they can be 2 or 3 days. I brought some of the 2 or 3 day ones here too, if you want to see those. So what I wanted to do for maybe not 20 minutes, but 15 minutes, is to POGIL you. Yes, it's a verb now also. I'm going to POGIL you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to get yourselves into groups of 3 or 4. Okay, that's why these are arranged the way they are, because it makes it really easy. Those of you in the cheap seats, there's a table over here, there's a table back there, and then there are these lovely comfy chairs with the short deck tables. Okay, so 3 or 4, find a comfortable place to hang out. What I'm going to ask you to do is to read through this little activity, to come to consensus on the questions. There are only 3 questions. And then, work through the exercises as time permits. It's the questions I really want to sort of deal with. But does that make sense? I'm also going to encourage you to find out the names of the people in your group. I encourage my students to find out the names of the people in their group and not just pass it. You'll notice at the top of this page there's a place for 4 names. I often work with 4 people in a group. And I get really mad at them when they're passing the page around to everybody so everybody can write their name in. I'm like, come on, really? You won't even ask. But, they are science people, and we have to be patient with science people. We're not the most friendly sometimes. There's 2 Americans.
That's our job.
They're very friendly. Shut up. No. You told me you're working the edge. Can everybody get a handout? Yes? If you don't feel like you have a group, then this beautiful table over here only has 2 people, and they'll be happy to take on somebody new. Find out the names of your people.
John. Start talking around.
Can only be a certain number.
Nancy's a chemist.
Good.
She's had to teach this stuff.
Yeah.
We have a ringer. Also, you can do it without a chemistry teacher.
Yeah.
Chemistry. But now don't you feel safer so you can see within that? I'm in nursing. So. And they love that.
Yeah, so you're at the back.
Just being here. Oh, I thought it was good. Be careful, bad time.
Well, whatever. Wow. We'll get from here.
So ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to
Just
have a consensus on what.
even everything up on one.
So I couldn't be an English teacher. Normally you allow me to take us through right there, bust down and then convert, or you like walking on around the whole person.
But now, I can't manage the idea is that if I'm trying to turn consensus so very often, I'm only taking one sheet from each group. And so whoever's in charge of writing them down, and I mix it up. I don't let them, I let them decide who's in charge of writing down, because somehow I'll just write down who and the others, and then that was with us. And so, but yeah, and yes,
Right here.
but it is very different in terms of rules, but I have that difference. I can move from
I was gonna ask that same question. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, let's just call it, because I don't want to,
yeah.
Dog zero, dog
Wait, so these numbers, these zeros are not saying that was more. It says right here. Some of them are saying, oh, these are three types of zeros, but it doesn't say which ones are. Right, like it says there are three types of zeros for one two. But it doesn't say here that type two zeros are in this type three is. But how does one do that? Or question, like. So you're saying that, or you're understanding, anything left to be said.
But you know, it's like 913.0. Trying to see if there's first question.
We know.
Yeah.
We're talking about that. You know what I'm saying? They're not in places, but you're trying to know what style. If it includes number. Yeah.
I guess my question is, how will we understand I would know that, like, you have, I guess, experience with numbers, but how am I supposed to know that based on, they're telling me they're figures here, right, zeros in between two numbers. So all of those are similar. Yeah. So basically what it's saying is, these are all these zeros. Yeah. Now here is zeros to the right. There's only one significant. Right.
What we're saying is this one here.
So I guess
First thing.
Yes.
15.6.
yeah, because what I think is saying is any to the left that starts non-zero are intimidating, the right is very clear. And then if you have between two zeros, it's good as well. So the only non-significant zeros are here between two non-zeros, left hand non-zero. See, now that makes sense. Yes, yes. Yeah, so if you look up here, there's every one of these, yeah, there are four numbers here, four significant numbers. They have a bunch. So that is zero. Similarly, here, because we know that these are all significant, any number to the right of the right number is non-zero number has to be finally. So like you were saying, a placeholder. Yes.
Well, that's a good one.
Zeros are to the left. What would the number be? The left most. There. Three other zeros to the right. Yes. Any zeros to the right or the right around it. So for example, this one right here, 5, 6, 3. What we should have those zeros.
So something is wrong with this student.
So that's the rules around. So it must come in with, yeah, so we'll 1, 2, 0, far left, 2, 6. Even that, so maybe the decimal can go right. So you look right at your wrong side.
Okay, I'm just trying to explain something which is mainly just defined. Okay.
But you're bringing up good
You will write that down. Okay, so yes, so that makes sense. There's a decimal in our pound. Yeah, so there's no decimal.
Does that imply that that's
These two here, they're actually making a small numbers. Right. So I guess we would have 4 down here. 85 and 0. These numbers to the left are
The longer biology kids are always caught in the web between me and you.
Oh, yeah.
The other way out.
So with this one, they're only using it.
And I understand.
So this one, we have 5 students.
That's what it is.
Yeah, but I don't see a way to touch it. It seems like how
Yeah. Oh, for those C.
No.
This one is 5. This one would be 2. And then F would be
So it'd be 2, 0, 0, 4,
So the way that would work here.
because there's a decimal.
And then all.
Some of our kids, again, some of our
Yeah, or even C. Why is C? Why are they able
Well, so.
So basically, because of the decimal, so this one, in this case, you write these numbers so that they this one may not change. Yeah. So wait, maybe this one you would only be 850.
probably is. So the answer is 2, of course.
C then would be. But it only has 3. Or it only has right. Do it, yeah.
So again.
We are at the box. This one.
So it's not just the extreme life, it's all the ones throughout.
Maybe if you ran it up to 0.1000 zeros would be significant. Correct. So they're after a decimal.
That value.
Why? Because they're between 2.
It's just
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
So the 3 here on the end.
And it's probably a good thing if I feel
These 2 are significant. Maybe this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah, I guess, yeah, moving around and stuff like that.
Okay, so you guys have done a great job. I'm gonna interrupt you for a minute. Some of you are not quite done, and that's okay. But I do want to talk about it for just a second. What I want to talk about. First of all, I'm not supposed to teach you a lesson necessarily on significant digits. So there's part of me that wants to talk about all the things I've heard in the room. I want to talk about, well, why are significant digits important, and what is the purpose of that last digit, they're really important to us in chemistry because it tells people how good our tools are, how good our measurements are. And that last significant digit always has uncertainty in it. Always has uncertainty in it. And that's why it's okay if you say, well, you know, mine's, if I round it, it's a 1 or a 0. Well, that's the uncertain digit. Okay? So when students are doing problems and making measurements in lab, they often are different in the last digit because they have made different measurements, made different assumptions. So that's okay, as long as that's the only one we're different in. But we're different than all the others. That sounds good. The other question that came up that I thought was kind of interesting, and that where one of the groups said, this is really easy. It's easy to write these rules. Other groups did not agree. Okay. Some of you were very good about answering the question but not writing a rule. Never, always, sometimes. You know. Thank you for that honest, loving response. Okay, but writing the rule is important because then we have to apply the rule in the end. So I think my plan was that you should be able to see the 3 steps pretty distinctly of that learning cycle I was talking about. We started with a model, so I asked you guys to just explore the model. The answers were already given. You didn't have to decide anything about what was significant or not significant in the model. I told you. And then, in exploring that model, you're going to try to write some rules. And those in the room who teach significant digits, and I know there are a few of you, you know, there's that famous list of rules. Students are always good with the list when it starts with all non-zero numbers are significant. They remember that rule. The zeros are always a problem. Always a problem. So instead of giving them the rules, telling them to go home and memorize the rules, I'm trying to do something different. And then the end, that's where we're sort of trying to develop the concept. In the end, I'm trying to see, okay, do your rules make sense to you? Such that you can actually answer questions about significant digits. So it's a short POGIL, very short, but it has most of the elements that are required in a POGIL activity. Okay? So the first thing I want you to tell me is not necessarily about significant digits. Is how is, you know, what's different about what you guys just did and what happens in classes most of the time?
The rules are given out first.
Yes. Generally speaking, when you turn to this page, you'll see these rules. Sometimes I'll put them up on over here. What else is different?
And then you send them home to figure out the exercises.
Great. I might do a couple of examples in class because, you know, I'm slow that way.
Interaction and learning from each other rather than just listening to me, you know, flap my jaws.
John also teaches in the chemistry department. So his jaws flap about the same. Okay. And some of you were learning from each other, you know, and some of you were leaning heavily on each other, but some of you were learning from each other. Now I know it feels a little unfair for me to come in here and, you know, start doing math. And you're like, this is not my field, and, you know, wait till I get you into a Japanese classroom. Great, she's Japanese. So, yeah, and that's not really the point. The point is that a lot of my students feel exactly the same way. They feel very, you know, wobbly-legged about this whole experience. And I can't believe she's asking me this. And in a few minutes, she's going to ask my group to report out on how many significant figures we think is in, you know, number 7. Okay. You tell her. No, I'm not telling her. Okay, so that's not, your feelings of uneasiness are not uncommon in students who have to do this for a grade. So, disadvantages. Off-task behavior, yeah, you got to work hard, man. You got to work that run. Now, some off-task behavior is okay because it's building community, and I'm okay with that. I mean, you know, but you got to work the room. And in this, I don't know, there were 33 people signed up to come here today. I don't know how many actually are here. But my class, my larger class is 48 people. And so that's a lot of groups. That's a lot of groups. And if you were in a room, an auditorium seating room, that's a lot of groups and a hard, I'm jumping over chairs to get to you. Okay, so last semester I was teaching a new auditorium in the new science building, but right outside this beautiful atrium with all these tables and chairs. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, the students were not there yet. So we just would take over the atrium. And then, when we're through with this part, we go back into the other room to share. But it is a problem. It is a problem.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
So, and this is the way that I teach, and this process inquiry is very important. But let me ask you this: instead of giving this information about significant figures in the front, what about just giving them these values, letting them go through the process, and then talk about significant figures? Because for some people, they're gonna shut down. I know some of my group, they were like, oh my gosh, what is this? I'm like, there was like, we wanted to close off maybe
Right.
before you even got to the fun part.
Yeah, and how much information to give is always kind of a catch-22. There's lots of ways to get information. Certainly their textbook has information on significant figures. I'm sure that, there's a YouTube video by some famous person that talks about significant figures. There's lots of ways to get that information. One of the reasons that and some of the POGIL activities that I have up here have different introductions. One of them, for example, is one where they collect the model in lab. And so they collected data. I brought the data table with me today because you guys couldn't do the lab. But, and then we go from there. But what I noticed, the reason that sometimes important information is given, I want everything that they need to do the activity to be in the activity. For my purposes of POGILing. It's not that I want to give them everything. I mean, there are other assignments they have to do where they have to go and find out things. But I don't want us to have to be somewhere else. The other thing is that, I don't know if you've ever looked at your students' notes. When my students come and tell me that I said things, and earlier today, when you said that, and I'd be like, wow, did I say that? Because if I did, I might have been having a stroke. We should have gotten me help. And so I got really concerned that, the important stuff, I'm not a PowerPoint person, as you can tell by the fact that I keep ignoring the one that's behind me. There are other slides that I have just sort of talked on through. Okay, I can't play that game very well. And so some of that was in an effort to at least get the important things in a correct manner to them. So that they had the information they needed to go forward. You're right, that one there's certainly, I waffle. But now I am pretty strict about saying what you're supposed to be able to do when you're done with this. I want the students to know what the end goal is. Because I tell them that they're responsible for their learning. And if they're going to be responsible for their learning, they need to know what it is I expect that they're learning. So that prerequisite skills, learning objectives piece, at least when I write them, I try to always have that in there. I try. So let me talk a little bit. You guys probably know the answer to some of these things already, but we'll go on. POGIL classrooms look different sometimes. Materials are designed for the use in cooperative teams. So that is true. I brought with me a handout of some of the group roles that I use. I change them up from time to time just because I find I never have landed on a set of group roles that I really love. I don't know why I can't. Yeah, she was gonna ask this. I don't know why I can't fall in love with a set of group roles. This is the hardest part for me because why is this the hardest part for me? I think it's really, really important that they work in groups, but I'm a lousy manager of the groups. I'm just going to give you, that's a shortcoming of mine, not a shortcoming of cooperative learning. And so I think when you do assign roles, what you can help to manage is that one kid who just says, these are the answers, everybody write them down, I've got this. Okay? I try never to make them the presenter person. And so a lot of times what happens next to my class is each group is going to present, or they may not all present the same things, but they're going to present. And I'm only going to talk to whoever the spokesperson is for that day, or the presenter, as is on the list I gave you guys. So I'm always I have internal group role conflict. But I do think it's really, really important that they work cooperatively, and roles is one way to try to say, look, this is your job, and you're not doing your job. You know, who's the person that's supposed to be doing the calculations for this group? Because I have some questions, you know. And the other guys are going, wait, here. Even if the person in charge of that doesn't know, his group or her group will make sure that they know if they know that that's who's going to get talked to. So the teacher is a facilitator. I have, like I said, I love to hear myself talk. I think I'm just hilarious. So it's a different role for me. And I've got to shut up and let the students do the learning. So I'm still teaching the class. I'm still deciding what we do and when we do it. I'm still doing the pacing. I'm still doing a lot of the things I used to do. It's just, you know, I don't have as many opportunities for one-liners because I'm not lecturing all the time. And I honestly, when I first started doing this, I missed my central role in the class. You know, they all had each other suddenly, not me so much. But you know, sometimes they let me play, and that's good. So I'm guiding students. I mean, I try as best I can to answer questions with questions. That is probably the hardest thing. When I go into class, if I take anything with me other than my POGIL handout, it's a list of questions. Because I've thought through this thing and I've tried to ask, where are they going to run? What are the questions they're going to ask? Oh, that's a great question. What do you think? You know? So the group over here, they ask a great question about, so what's the purpose of significant digits anyway? Why? Why is it that way? You know, we've got the rule. Why? That's a great question. If we were in a chemistry class, we'd talk about it. And then, you know, which focuses on this discipline-specific content to try to raise the level of thinking in the classroom. Y'all didn't really smack me with the real disadvantage, and the biggest disadvantage. So trying to manage it, trying to give them time to wrestle with what could have been a PowerPoint of rules. Slam it up there. Y'all write it down. Don't practice that. It's a lot different than that is not the kind of time I had planned for this. Now, to be honest, I did this last semester in lab. One of the first labs we're doing, Chem 11 and 10, we're doing a lot of measurement anyway. So I squeezed it in the lab because that's where making measurements makes sense. So, but you know, there you go. What's I going to say next? I don't know. It's going to be good though. Let me see. Cheat sheet. Oh yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about models. POGIL is built around this idea of models, and the model is where you're presenting whatever you want them to play with. Okay. For us in science, it's very often data. A data set. Even today's little significant figures thing was a model of data. You know, here's a bunch of examples, similarities and differences, that sort of thing. A model could be a picture. Okay, it could be a diagram. And then very often, one of the first things I do if it's a picture is that I just make sure we all know what everything in the picture means. So some of the questions would be really, really straightforward. What does the little squiggly thing represent? You know, what does the thing with the two balls, one of them is gray, represent? Things that seem really simple, but you want to make sure they're reading the model correctly. A model could be primary source of some kind. I mean, I'm jumping far out of my field here, okay? It could be a primary source of some kind. Like I said, sometimes we build models in lab. So we build models in the sense that we collect data, and that becomes the model for the next POGIL experiment. You know, oh gosh, we spent all day in lab collecting that data, and now you want us to answer questions. That seems so unfair somehow. So that's the where you decide what the content is that you're going to present, and choosing the model. And designing the models is the trickiest part, because once you get a good model, asking questions about it, it's not hard. Once you get a good model. And so that's so I'll talk a little bit about results, and then I have a lot of other examples that if we want to look at them, we can. Make sure I get done what I'm supposed to get done. There's a lot of research that's been done on POGIL, particularly in the sciences. The earliest stuff was done in the early 90s, mid-90s, in chemistry classes. Some of the other kind of results in terms of its use have been done in biology, particularly high school biology or AP biology. Generally what they show is student attrition is lower in POGIL courses. Mastery content is usually higher in courses. It's certainly no worse. I'm going to tell you why I have put that there. It's certainly no worse. And students eventually prefer POGIL classrooms over straight lecture. Eventually is also emphasized on purpose. Last semester, when I started the semester off, I had a group of girls sitting in the first 2 rows of the lecture hall who were just belligerent. I mean, there's just no way getting around it. They didn't think I was doing my job. And they didn't care who knew it or how loudly they knew it. And I mean, this is the look. Really? We would go and I would ask them to get in groups. They would disappear into the bathroom just off the atrium and sometimes stay gone for quite some time. Luckily, they were girls and I could go in and face out the bathroom. The guys gone in, I got to be like, well, whatever. It took a long time for them to buy in. And if you were a new professor, if you were feeling somewhat not as committed yourself to this, they had the kind of attitude to try to drive you right back to talking. So they all survived the class. They all did reasonably well, and 2 of them were really angry because they didn't get into my 1120 class. Same people who wanted to shoot me at the beginning of the semester. We've been doing POGIL in the chemistry department. I've been doing POGIL in my classes since '96, but after we started the course redesign push, 2 of my colleagues have joined me, so there are 3 of us doing POGIL right now out of 9 people who taught general chemistry in the fall. And my 2 other colleagues, it was their 2nd semester doing it. One of them did it in the summer and was going in the fall. One of them did it in the spring and was going into the fall. So they're still pretty new at this process. And so we did collect a little data over the fall semester. In general chemistry, we give a common final exam at the end of 1110. And all I can tell you about that data for sure is that we did no worse. Okay, so looking at the general chemistry ACS exam, American Chemical Society exam, the 2 high scores, the 2 high averages for classes, one was a POGIL, one was a non-POGIL class. Mine and John's. And the 2 low scores, one was a POGIL and one was a non-POGIL class. And the 3rd one was slap in the middle. So while the average for the POGIL classes was a little higher, it's not significantly higher. Same thing with attrition. I told Sheila I want to look at the attrition data and take the FAs out because I don't think it's really fair that we have to count those. Kids aren't coming to class. I don't know how they can judge whether they like what I'm doing or not. But with the attrition data, again, the least attrition was in a POGIL class. The most attrition was in a non-POGIL class, but the average attrition really is not significantly different 1 semester in. We have one other set of data that we haven't looked at, and that's conceptual understanding. We gave a conceptual test in lab at the beginning of lab, so all the students in 1110 took it, and they took it at the end of lab. And we haven't looked at that data. We think that data will be, at least it's things that I personally value more than what necessarily shows up on the ACS exam. But it's a big pile of paper sitting in a box, so far nobody has had time to get into a computer. So,
When you look at gender, you talked about the girls. Are you looking at gender issues between?
We're keeping up with it. We haven't analyzed it yet in terms of, generally speaking, with POGIL, minority students and women are more interested in the community part. In other words, they're more likely to delve into this community stuff. It has shown no adverse effects on white males. They're still right in there, you know, plugging away, being the spokesperson for their group. But that minority students and women, they tend to talk more to their peers than they would offer a question out to the whole class. So that's other people's data. We are just tracking it now for us. Like I said, it's pretty small so far. We also we did a little survey with the POGIL kids on just a little Likert scale dance from 1 to 5. Would they recommend this class to someone else over the courses that the three of us were teaching? The average was 3.8. They would recommend a POGIL class over, you know, that they enjoyed it, they would recommend to their friends. They found it engaging, that's a 4.1, and 3.8 again for better than lecture. These are not my students that I'm going to show you these results on again. I didn't think that would be all that fair. This is from one of my colleagues. So this is somebody who's only been doing POGIL for a couple of semesters. And we didn't ask the students to give us verbal feedback, but, you know, we gave them a survey and there was a space at the bottom. And so several of them decided that they would. And so I didn't just pick the good ones. I think the mad kids just didn't like me. But I did think that, you know, I was impressed with how much they talked about the good aspects of POGIL without being coached. And, you know, they didn't get a seminar on what POGIL was supposed to do. And so I was pretty impressed that they sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of at least what we're trying to accomplish. Yes, sir.
Do you use the term POGIL so that students have that to carry with them?
My students, well, like these students, they call them the worksheets.
Yeah.
Which makes me always makes me laugh. Because, you know, I feel like Ditto in the old teacher's movie, you know. Some of them. Yeah, here comes Amy with her worksheets. So that's what the students see. They see it. Oh, look, it's a worksheet day. Okay, whatever. But I did want to, you know, share with you at least a little bit of feedback from them. Yes, John.
What amount of your class is this? What percentage? I mean, how often are you doing this?
That's a good question. Like I said, some POGILs are like 20 minutes and in and out, and that's done. I have, yeah, here's one on periodic trends, and I think I worked on this one, the students worked on this POGIL for over a week in my class. So it sort of depends on the topic. In terms of percentage, generally speaking, I like to use them in two places particularly. Starting out something new, okay, or like the significant figures, something that is just a small thing that is particularly a problem, that always turns up being a problem. You know, significant figures, we just bang our head against the wall. It's always a problem. And so some of you are going to go, really? That this is what they have trouble with? Yes. Yes.
So you find that using the POGIL with significant figures, that's making a difference? They're not making as many errors?
They're not making as many errors. But we're having to spend a lot more time up front with them thinking about it. So, and then, like I said, usually I follow this one right up with a 2-hour experience where you're making a bunch of measurements and having to practice it.
Would you describe those subsequent sessions as POGIL, or?
No, not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily. In that case, I call them lab. Although a lab can also can lend itself to POGIL. It's just a different way to do the model. So to answer John's question, I'm doing one at least once a week. Okay, at least once a week. But very often, I'll finish it in a day. And so it carries over. By the time we work through the POGIL and present the POGIL out, have the kids talk about what they got, That's in a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it can easily be a Monday, Wednesday.
Every time you're doing traditional.
A lot of the rest of the time, I'm either, this semester in 11/20, it's a little more difficult. I'm doing demonstration problems, which is another thing that I do, where I do a demonstration and there's a series of questions. I guess it could be a POGIL, except that I haven't written it up pretty. The model is the demonstration, and then they have a series of questions that they're dealing with. Or I try not to lecture more than 20 minutes at a shot. And I also assess every week, so that takes a lot of my time.
How do you make special arrangements for the kind of content that you're probably having to leave out and not cover since you're?
Well, my students, the stuff that we have to get done, we're in constant negotiations, or we should be probably more. Gary and I are in constant negotiation about what constitutes Chem 1110. Right now, it's too much, and the stuff that gets left out is different professor to professor, and that's not really. I'm not proud of this it's just kind of the way things are. We're a department full of free agents, and they're hard to coach. So we, what I have for my regular class is I have a series of online homework assignments that cover the topics that we're both POGILing and not POGILing. And so we also spend some time, have any trouble with the homework, let me know. I try to reserve that to stuff that I think is more direct transfer. It's not so conceptually heavy. Phase diagrams, there's an example. I think phase diagrams are not conceptually heavy. And so they have some homework problems on them. If they have trouble with it, then when we're doing the Q&A on homework, they can ask it, but they know they're responsible for that stuff. So yeah, I have a plan. I don't know if it's a great plan, but I have had to pick and choose. And so in terms of the scores on the tests and whatnot, sometimes they didn't get it right, and I know why they didn't get it right. We didn't do it, and I'm okay with that, because I just can't do it all. Yes, sir.
That's what I was going to ask. The final standardized test that all the sections take, can you pull out the things that you do POGIL and compare those?
Yeah, right now all we've done is just run the totals, but that's Gary wants to take the data. Gary White is one of the other people who was on the redesign team with me, and he's one of the people. We sent him to POGIL training, and he's been doing POGIL for a couple semesters. And he's the one who pulled all the data. He's our Gen Chem coordinator, and he pulled all the data. And he and I talked about all the ways we could say, okay, these are the things that everybody covered. These are the things that that Mike and Gary and I POGILed, but we haven't done that yet. He just got everybody's data at the beginning of this semester and from the end of last, and he ran some quick numbers for me so I could come here and talk to you about what they said. It's like, Gary, do we have anything? Here's what I got so far.
You certainly touched on with a little bit of data about that they prefer POGIL, eventually with the numbers. The motivation factor is huge. The attrition rate is so important, but also if we can have them not only persistence done, but for those who might not have been interested to then take an interest because they've engaged in this inquiry learning and then decide, wow, this is pretty cool. I think I want to take some more classes. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, we're, like I said, attrition is the thing right now, right? Or the not thing. Retention is the thing. And so our courses, the course we're looking at has some pretty abysmal attrition rates. Last semester, there was a section that had 80% DXW in Chem 1110. So we had attrition rates that ran anywhere from about 20% to 80%. Yes?
Your chemistry 11/20, is that second semester, third semester?
It's the second semester, yes.
So have you tried it like with incoming freshman classes right off the bat?
Yeah, that's our chemistry 1110 that we were doing in the fall. At least that's where the incoming freshmen should be. Now, in 1110, we get freshmen and we also get juniors. So we don't. The freshmen are actually easier to deal with. they have less expectation about what I'm supposed to be doing. If it's their first semester in college, you know, they're kind of pliable. You go, well, that's just what college is. And they go, okay. Repeaters and juniors, they're like, yeah, this is not the way college is. So, but yeah, the courses that we were charged with redesigning were those intro level courses across campus. And so that's where we started. And that's, Mike and Gary are continuing in 1110 this semester. And I'm in 1120. Right on the fly.
You know to what extent it's being used in other disciplines, social sciences?
I know that it is being used. I don't know the percentages. When I talked to my friend Rick Boo, who's the head of the POGIL Institute, he said thousands of disciplines, Amy, thousands. And I said, Rick, you can't even name thousands of disciplines. So, you know, he was being a little.
How about here on campus?
I don't know. And from what we presented it as part of the course redesign last semester. We had the biologists were doing sort of a mixed methods. They were using some POGIL-like activities. They were also doing some what was the other thing that my brain just went? Flipped classroom. They were doing some flipped classroom stuff and then using POGIL activities as part of their classes. I don't know where they are with that. Bruce Cahoon was one of the big leaders of that. Of course, he doesn't work here anymore. Those endowed chairs, man. Tough. You have to go take them when they don't. There is a POGIL Institute, POGIL.org, and they do workshops that, you know, train people to do this. And then they also do sort of, I'm a trained trainer. I've been to, they sent me to POGIL as part of all of this. They sent me to learn how to train other people. That is not what just happened here today, okay? What just happened here today was just me. Because if I actually done a workshop where I'm actually training people, then, you know, I got to tell the POGIL.org people. This is just me talking to a bunch of colleagues.
Our math gen ed people also.
Oh yeah, the Jeremy and James. Jeremy and James.
Yeah.
They're looking at pre-calc.
There's a couple of different variations. I mean, POGIL is, you know, the idea is transferable and other people call it different things.
That's right.
Problem-based learning, inquiry learning. It's, you know, it's the bottom line is kind of that. The two parts that Amy was saying is the building of community and the construction of the concept. So, you know, some people may be calling it flipped, some people may be calling it other things, but there's quite a bit of interest going on terms of how do we move away from that lecture, you know, as the predominant way of presenting to using more of this, you know, kind of problem-based and inquiry-based learning type of things. And as Amy was saying, that a lot of people are combining that, you know, use the hybrid type approach where they're doing some things online that are more of that, you know, non-concept or the straightforward information that it's, you know, lecture definitions and some of those things that may be better done online, so that frees up the time to do it in class for the you know, the problem-based solving type of things. Yes, sir.
The groups you use, are these chat groups or just generated each class period?
It depends. I usually do encourage them to change groups because they tend to get sort of stagnant. But I'll let them go a month, 3 weeks, a month, and then I'll say, oh, you know, today we're gonna do a new POGIL and I want you to find a new group. And they'll be like, oh, they don't like that. But that's okay because I want them to know other people.
But they're finding their groups rather than you assigning them.
I do not assign. There are people who do, but I do not. In my larger classes, I guess I just haven't found a really convenient way to figure out how to do that without taking up a lot of time. And so, unless I've got the lost and wandering. The lost and wandering will get assigned because I'm here's somebody you can work with. So just kind of wandering on.
But then tend to start sitting in the same areas. They're going to work with the same.
Yeah. And that was one of the advantages of, like I said, taking them out of the stadium seats and moving them into the atrium, because I could say, okay, I need you two over there, and you two over there, and you two. So that's good. In the sciences, again, I don't know about any other disciplines, but there are manuals. This is not, it's just a bunch of POGILs written by David Hansen, who's a chemist. And I know the biology ones because I've seen those as well. But because that's the heavy pieces. Oh my gosh, how could I ever write all this stuff? But most of us have, that diagram we've been using for years, or that, that article, or that thing that's been the meat of our class. You think, well, how can I break that down and make it a model for students? So, yeah. I think I'm almost out of time. 1 hour.